here I was awake on my lunch hour, and I am now on a hillside and can't figure out what's going on.
Wow.
I come up to a group of people, and they're surrounding, on the top of a hill, and they're making a circle waiting for Jesus to come.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going, well, maybe Jesus is coming for the second time. Here he is, and he's coming back. And I look up and I see him coming down in the middle of our group. He looks at each person individually, and he's going around the group. Now I'm the last to join the group, so I'm kind of thinking, I wonder if I'm supposed to be here. And he comes around to me, and he looks at me, but he doesn't say anything. He thinks something, and I hear him. And he's looking at me, and he says, "I love you with a wild love."
So we have Chris DuPré today with us. Thank you so much again, Chris, for your time and your story, to share your story with us. And some of the audience already know Chris' wonderful story, but let me introduce a little bit first. So Chris' father was a World War II vet and was tortured and abused at the Nazi camp in Germany. He came back as a war hero, but started to struggle with PTSD symptoms. Soon after he returned home, he married Chris' mother and had 3 children, and Chris was the youngest. Chris was a healthy, strong, and energetic child, but somehow became a sort of target or outlet of his father's internal anger. Chris was physically abused by his father repeatedly for years. One day, Chris' mother walked in the house at the exact moment his father knocked him off and sent him flying into a wall. Shortly after that, his parents got divorced. After Chris moved with his mother and siblings, he felt safe for the first time ever. Chris enjoyed sports and was a very talented athlete. In high school, everyone expected him to receive an athletic scholarship to college, but then he got injured and the dream crashed. He became depressed and got addicted to drugs. But during that time, his sister got saved and led his brother and mother to Jesus. And Chris also got saved. And one day, Chris had a very unusual encounter with the Lord. Chris, could you please tell us about it?
Well, sure. Your history is just amazing to see the pictures and to go back and
All from the book.
Yeah, I'm feeling the story myself. My heart was athletics, and to meet the Lord after that depressing year was just wonderful. But what I came away with, even though I knew the Lord at that time, I didn't have an experience of being God's son, because that would mean I would have another father, and I wasn't crazy about the father that I had. And so I stayed away from calling God Father. He was God, he was Lord, he was King, he was all the big things, but he wasn't personal. And so I worked at one time, I lived in this little apartment with a couple of guys, and where I lived in Rochester, New York, it was winter, and where we are, it's very cold. We have, 120 inches of snow every year. And at winter, when winter starts, you close the windows, you put the heat on, and that's how you live. And so I came home one day for lunch. I had an hour for lunch. I was eating a bologna sandwich and listening to people in the apartment underneath us who were believers, and they were singing and having a wonderful time. And I stood there eating my sandwich, and I felt a breeze, and I thought somebody had left the window open, and I kind of got a little upset with one of the guys. Why would you leave the window open? So I opened my eyes, and I was on a hillside. I have heard people tell stories, where they see angels and they get lifted up and they get moved here. I'm not one of those kind of people. I don't go around seeing angels and having all sorts of weird experiences. But here I was awake on my lunch hour, and I am now on a hillside and can't figure out what's going on.
Wow.
I come up to a group of people, and they're surrounding, on the top of a hill, and they're making a circle waiting for Jesus to come. And I'm just going, well, maybe Jesus is coming for the second time. Here he is, and he's coming back. And I look up and I see him coming down in the middle of our group. He looks at each person individually, and he's going around the group. Now I'm the last to join the group, so I'm kind of thinking, I wonder if I'm supposed to be here. And he comes around to me, and he looks at me, but he doesn't say anything. He thinks something, and I hear him. And he's looking at me, and he says, "I love you with a wild love." And the church I grew up in, it was a little on the conservative side that I met the Lord. And you always did things, as scripture says, decently and in order. So when he said wild love, I thought, wow, something's not right here. And I said to myself, you can't love me in a wild love. Wild's not good. That's not decent and in order. And he looked at me, and I heard him again say, no, I love you with a wild love. And he says, and when I say wild, I mean a love that no man can tame. No man can tame my love for you. And I'm like, oh, then love me as wild as you want. And he begins to rise. We all start to rise. We go up 5 miles, and I'm just still thinking, this is not a dream. Because I was awake in my living room eating my sandwich, and we get up in 5 miles up, and he comes down and sits down next to me, and I can't look at him. He's gone. He's so full of grace and light and love and power. And I finally begin to turn, and I put my head down, because I just got saved, and I just had a horrible year in college. I did not serve the Lord at all, didn't know the Lord, and I was filled with shame. And he leaned over, and he took my head in his hands, and he put his hands on either side of my face, and he said, I love you. And I dropped my head because I could, because he had the way he had his hands. Then he took his hands, and they were big hands and strong hands. So he put his hand on my chin and one hand on the back of my head, and I could not move my head, and like a vice grip. And he's holding me, and he's looking at me, and he goes, I love you. And I just said, oh, Lord, I'm so sorry. And he pulls me up, so my head's not down. He pulls me up, and he goes, the one thing that you need to know is how deeply and how vast I love you, because of who you need to be and what you're called to do. You need to know how deep my love is for you. And this ball of fire shot out of his chest, went into my chest, and I just fell backwards. And I felt this burning in my chest. And as I'm falling backwards, I literally am back in my living room, listening to the music down below. They probably heard a thud on the floor and didn't know what it was. And the next thing I know, I am just weeping, and I'm crying and I'm crying. And I hadn't cried like that in my entire life. Matter of fact, I ran to my bed, put my head on my pillow, and began to cry. And I probably cried for 20 minutes, and I lifted up my pillow, and water came out underneath my pillow. My pillow was soaked. And I put my hand on my mattress, and I pushed down, and water shot out between my fingers. I had cried through my pillow and wet my mattress.
Wow.
And it was the most incredible thing. But I just remember I had to get back to work. So I washed my face, I wiped my tears out, went back to work. But the one thing that suddenly was changed was that just before that all happened, here I am, I'm Christian, but I still hadn't reconciled with my father. I would see him at certain family things. I would be polite. I would shake his hand from a distance, as far away as my hand could. And suddenly, on the other side of this experience, when people would say, have you seen your father? Because they knew how I felt about my dad. Anything that had to do with my father, it didn't have the same power. It didn't emotionally take me out. I felt as if God had washed the insides of me. He did that with my tears. And I felt like, people talk about deliverance and and the change. I felt God delivered me from deep pain and bitterness. And I didn't have that toward my dad anymore. And that whole experience was, I saw the face of God and I knew the love of God. And when it penetrated my heart, and that ball of fire penetrated my heart, something shifted. And I was able from that point on to go on a new journey with my father. Not to start, you know, it was little bits at a time. But for years, I had kept it right there. I wasn't going to change it. I wasn't going to be nice to him. But my heart suddenly shifted when I saw how God deeply he loved me. Something broke in me, and receiving God's love allowed me to give God's love. Changed my life forever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I just want to stress I had friends who used to say, I saw an angel at church today. And it's like, where? You know, I'd love to see an angel. I was a worship leader, so I'm up singing music on this little area. And suddenly the music started to get wind. I don't know, there was kind of windy in the church or something, some fan or something. And somebody said, there was an angel behind you flapping its wings this morning. Wow. I saw it. And I go, you know, well, the papers flew around, so maybe its wings, but I'd never seen them. So for me, I was always a little critical of people that saw things until that experience. And I was awake and I saw him face to face, and I know he loves me.